This device is very interesting. So this is, from what I can guess, supposed to be competing to the 2DS. Pretty much same form factor, flat, non-foldable with 2 screens. Obviously this is actually just one long screen, but we'll get to the 2DS comparison later on. So let's go ahead and open this up and see what it looks like inside. Pretty basic packaging. An instruction manual if you really need that. I'm assuming there's a charger in here. Yes, it was a pain to get out, but it does come with a nice little USB-C charging cable if you don't have one. Okay, so let's move on to the device itself. I think right now you can only get this in white or black. Usually I'm the type of person that would go with the black handheld, but I thought the white would be a nice contrast against my black desk mat. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we have here. We've got your D-pad, feels pretty solid. No complaints here. We've got this little analog stick, feels pretty good. I would say similar in size to the analog stick on the Nintendo Switch. Let's see how it actually compares to the 2DS's analog stick. So one thing you'll notice on my 2DS is the rubber membrane has actually come apart. So I no longer have the rubber membrane on my 2DS. This thing is actually very, very old. Definitely has seen better days, but still works. That's all that matters. So let's see. Yeah, it feels a little bit different. So the 2DS is more of a flat joystick, whereas this one has a little bit of range to it. Definitely is like raised up on a longer stem compared to the 2DS. But overall, both feel pretty good. I think I prefer the feel of the joystick on the Magicx device, but that could just be because it's new and my 2DS is pretty old. One thing that looks like it's kind of showing up on camera, I'm not sure how well you guys will actually see that once everything's rendered, but the coloring on the thumbstick is actually a slightly yellow, which is kind of weird. I highly doubt this is a used device. They just came out, I want to say 3 weeks ago, a month ago at most. So very unlikely that this is used, and even if it is used, it's unlikely that the joystick itself would have yellowed and nothing else. If you guys got this device in the white colorway, let me know if you have a very slight yellow tinge to your thumbstick. I'm curious. Let's move on to the other buttons. So we have your face buttons, A, B, X, Y, etc. Feel pretty decent. A nice little mush to them, not super clicky. Let's see how they compare to the 2DS buttons. So the 2DS buttons are a little bit flat compared to the, these have a little bit of a roundedness on the face, which is not bad. I mean, that's really personal preference on if you prefer the flat feeling buttons or if you prefer a little bit of roundness to them. I think I prefer the roundness on the buttons. Feels a bit more premium. Let's test the start and select. Okay, yeah, these buttons, they're okay. They get the job done. You can press them. I'm used to start and select buttons protruding a little bit more on handheld devices. These are kind of flat, which is not bad. I mean, they're not difficult to press. They don't hurt when I press them, so that's good. Let's check it out on the 2DS. Yeah, so the 2DS, they stick out a little bit more, but they're actually softer to press. Again, really comes down to personal preference. You're not going to be hitting your start and select buttons that often, so it really doesn't matter to me. You do have this home button / back button. So that's interesting. Let's see what we've got. L1, L2, R1, R2, and we have 2 ports, OTG and DC. I don't know what OTG means. I'll have to look into that. DC is obviously for charging. And then we've got our headphone jack, which is always nice to have. Nothing on the bottom. On the left, you have your volume up and down. Very clicky, responsive. Volume down actually is more clicky than volume up, interestingly enough. And then on the right hand side, we have the power button as well as 2 microSD slots. On the back, I believe this is a fan vent. I don't think that's actually a speaker. We've got the Ampound, I don't know how you say that. We've got the sticker for the device. And then on the front, we have 2 speakers. So we have a stereo speaker system, as well as your indicator light in the top left. Let's go ahead and get this thing powered on and see what it actually looks like. Okay, so this is their custom launcher. We can see that it jumps directly to Nintendo DS. At the top left, we can see you have platform, apps, settings. Top right, you have indicators for being connected to Wi-Fi and your battery life. At the bottom left, your list of currently active systems. So right now, the included micro SD card came with essentially every Nintendo DS game. I want to say probably 90% of the Nintendo DS library. There's also some Tate games, but I haven't looked into those yet. So if we use R2, we can actually toggle between the platform, apps, and settings. You do have system settings up here, so if we were to jump into that, this actually opens up the device's system settings, which just looks like a standard Android operating system. You've got your internet connection, it's got Bluetooth, you can view all your apps, battery, etc., etc. Nothing too interesting here. We can actually check out the storage and see that this comes with a 64 gigabyte micro SD card, and 50 gigs of that is already occupied with ROMs that they've thrown on here. Now, one thing I did notice that's kind of a small gripe, not a super big deal, but it might bug you like it bugged me, is while you can choose an app or a setting or an option to jump into with the A button, you cannot jump out of it with the B button. The B button actually doesn't do anything. And if we look at Y just moves you down, and X does nothing as well. You can navigate with this, you can navigate with your D-pad, but if you want to go back, you actually have to press this button all the way over here, which, again, small complaint, but I would prefer if I could just go back and forth with A and B. So, kind of hard to see, but we have a few other options in here that are kind of interesting. So you can update your game list and your configuration. You can clear image cache. There is a built-in game switcher that I have not gotten a chance to mess around with. I would imagine this is very similar in function to the Miu Mini running Onion OS. We have a device button test, so you can test that all your buttons are working properly. Change some hotkeys for the front end launcher. You can change your theme color settings. I'm trying to get this to focus. There we go. Theme color settings, wallpaper selection, and this is a really cool part. So CPU performance settings. You can actually jump in here and you can change your global platform CPU mode. So you can use the power saving mode, balance mode is the default, or you can jump into performance modes. You've got a built-in scraper, scrape all game media. Okay, so now let's try and check out a game. We'll press A to jump into the DS library, and as you can see, this actually comes preloaded with a ton of different DS games. Like, think of anything, they probably have it, including Pokemon, which is very surprising. Most of the time, these devices do not ship with Pokemon games, likely because they are afraid of Nintendo. So let's just jump over. Okay. Yeah, so as you can see, it's got a few Pokemon games on here. For the record, if Nintendo is watching, I own all of these Pokemon games. I am a huge Pokemon fan. I have physical copies of all of these. So let's jump into Pokemon White version 2. It's loading up drastic. Okay, and we can see that it comes pre-configured with this overlay to separate the two screens, which is kind of nice. But yeah, it looks to be running pretty well. Let's jump in here. So I did hop in earlier just to see how things ran. Seems to be running at pretty much full speed as indicated by the numbers in the top left. You can toggle fast forward, and it plays fast forward at pretty much full speed. Let's turn this down just a little bit. So yeah, I mean, everything looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and open up the menu. Now, one thing to note is this device is touchscreen, so if I want to open my bag, I can just touch that. If I want to swap over between the different categories of the bag, everything works as you would expect it to. So when you exit a game, it lets you jump between others with the game switcher. This is how the game switcher functions. I wonder if there is a way to force this to pop up instead of having to exit a game. Can't be this. It's gotta be... Maybe I hold a button? Aha! Okay, so if you hold the home button, that's how you bring up the game switcher. Good to know. Now I can jump back into Pokemon. Now it doesn't seem like it loads from a save state. I wonder if that's something that can be adjusted, because on Onion OS, if you were to hop between games like this, it picks back up immediately from where you left off instead of loading the game over again. This looks like it's loading the game over again. Let's try... Was this Castlevania? Yeah, so it's not loading from a save state. I wonder if that's an emulator-based setting or something with the game switcher itself. Game switcher, on or off. Doesn't look like there's any way to force it to load back from a save state. That's very unfortunate. Okay, let's also go a bit more in-depth on the 2DS comparison. So one thing I kind of wanted to do a quick comparison of is the weight. The Magicx device is substantially lighter than the 2DS. So if we put this on the scale, we can see this weighs in at just about 265 grams, whereas the Magicx device weighs in at 188. So almost 100 grams less, which is quite the difference. One thing I want to point out is, while in most cases lighter is preferable just because that means less fatigue during long game sessions, the other thing that you have to keep in mind is form factor in terms of how you're holding the device. So with the Magicx device, it's just small enough to where I can rest my pinkies underneath the bottom little cutout sections here, and everything else can rest in place. My hands back here are pretty comfortable, not touching too much. So honestly, this device is not too bad when it comes to the form factor. In terms of the 2DS, it actually is a wedge shape, as most of you know. So this leads to the top of it being heavier than the bottom of it, which is also pretty nice. So in terms of form factor, this is a little bit wider, which means that for me at least, it's going to be more comfortable to hold. So if we break out the measuring tape, we can see that this is about 5.5 inches across. It's actually only slightly wider. Wow. It feels much wider when you're holding it, but it's, what is that, like a half of an inch half an inch wider. Okay, I mean, it definitely feels much wider. I guess that has something just to do with the thickness of it. It feels like a much bigger device when you're holding on to it. But the weight definitely does make a difference. I feel like, I don't know, it can kind of go either way. I feel like, you know, this is lightweight, so I can play this for a long time. But at the same time, the weight distribution of this one is really, really well designed, well thought out by Nintendo. All the weight's in the upper portion of it, which is where most of the time your hands are going to be resting up here. So you don't really notice it. The wedge design is actually very comfortable because the smaller section of the wedge fits in between the crevices of your hand. So you don't really notice the device's weight that much. Yeah, so let's do a quick screen measurement as well. I mean, you guys can clearly see that the screen on the top of the 2DS is much larger than the Magicx device. However, one thing that's kind of hard to see is that the bottom screen is also larger. So if we measure this across, we'll see that this is, what is that, about 3.5 inches diagonal, whereas if we do the diagonal on this, it's about 2.5 inches. Let's see if we can line that up a little bit more. Yeah, about 2.5 diagonal. So you're getting, measure that properly. Yeah, 3.5 versus 2.5. If we look at the top screen of the 2DS, you're getting a 4-inch diagonal. So I think that's the biggest issue with this Magicx device that a lot of people have pointed out, is the screen is just a little bit too small. It's playable. You can get around it, you can deal with it. If you're locked in on your game and you're having fun, you might stop noticing the small screen size, but it's definitely something that sticks out. I feel like if they came out with an XL version of the device where it was a little bit wider, it would sell like hotcakes compared to its current iteration. So I mean, that's my main complaint with this Magicx device, is just the screen. If it could just be a little bit wider here, a little bit wider over here, just expand it out, it'd be a much more compelling option. One thing that also kind of keeps me from recommending this over just buying a 2DS or a 3DS that you mod is the fact that your 2DS and your 3DS are going to be capable of playing 3DS games. Obviously, that's what they're built to do. This device can only play up to just standard DS. So you're not getting 3DS emulation out of this device. And for the price point, I would be much more inclined to buy a used 2DS or 3DS, any variant, and modify them for emulation purposes. The one thing that this probably beats out is vertical arcade emulation, which we'll showcase a little bit later in the video. Not really going to be able to do that too well on here. Another comparison that I just noticed is the 2DS in particular is a single mono speaker, whereas the Magicx device has stereo front-facing speakers. In terms of audio quality, the Magicx device is not too bad. It's not amazing. It definitely gets much louder than the 2DS. We can actually try and do a comparison. I'm not sure how well it's going to show up, but we'll crank this up to the highest volume, and we'll just see how this turns out. These games do take a little while to load too. So I mean, that's something that you can keep in mind, is both handhelds take a little bit of time to load their games. Alright, so I'll move this a little bit closer to the microphone. But yeah, all you're getting is this single mono speaker. It's not too bad, it gets the job done, but nothing crazy. So let's switch that back to sleep mode. Let's bring it a little bit closer to focus. Yes, I'm not sure how well that comes across on the video. I'll have to see whenever I do the editing of this video. But the Magicx device is definitely a lot louder, and the sound quality, in my opinion, is a lot better. So I mean, that's one plus over the 2DS. Again though, when it comes to what you're getting out of each of these devices, the ability to play 3DS games plus everything else that it can emulate once it's modded, versus this can only play up to DS, I feel like for a lot of people that's going to be a deal breaker, especially when you consider things such as the screen size. Screen on this is going to be a lot better for those of you that may have bad eyesight or just don't want to strain your eyes in general when trying to look at the 2.5-inch diagonal screen over here. The stylus. So you have two types of styluses, or stylus. Styli? I'm not sure. So you have this, which is your modern stylus. This is a capacitive stylus that works on, phones, tablets, pretty much any modern touchscreen device is going to use one of these capacitive stylus. This, on the other hand, is your traditional Nintendo DS, 2DS, 3DS, etc. resistive stylus. So the 2DS, the Nintendo DS, the 3DS, they all feature a resistive touchscreen. But interestingly enough, I'm not sure if this is the case with the regular DS, you can also use your capacitive stylus on these screens. So if I were to jump back to the home menu, just for easy comparison, okay, so we can see that I just tap with this little stylus, works. If I use the capacitive stylus, also works. Great. Now here comes the problem. The Magicx device is touchscreen. However, you cannot use this resistive style stylus. So if I touch on the screen, even if I press really hard, tapping, it doesn't register anything with this stylus. You have to use one of these capacitive stylus. So look, if I touch it, I can swipe. I guess I can't select anything, but you can see that I'm able to swipe with this stylus. Again, if we swap back to this one, no swipe. Doesn't do anything. So one thing to keep in mind is you will need the capacitive stylus. I feel like for a screen of this size, you want to look for one that has as small of a tip as you can possibly find. This one's not too bad. It gets the job done. It's the size of around the size of a pea, maybe a little bit smaller than the size of a pea. And for the most part, I'm able to navigate this screen with no issue using this stylus. I've tested it out in a couple games and it works fine. But if it had a tip this size, the size of the regular DS stylus tip, I feel like this would be much better when you're trying to be more accurate using the stylus. So that's one thing to keep in mind. You cannot use your regular DS stylus. You do have to get a capacitive stylus. And honestly, I feel like for some games this is kind of required. Yes, you can use your fingers and your fingers work just fine for the most part, but you're going to be more accurate with this. At least for me, that's how it works. One thing to go over. I had asked a bunch of people on Reddit over at the SBC Gaming subreddit. I asked a bunch of questions on what you guys wanted me to cover, which is why I'm going over most of those now. And so, let me see. One user in particular had mentioned that Drastic was shipping with the audio disabled. For me, that was not the case. Let's go ahead and launch White 2 again. You guys saw earlier that the audio was working perfectly fine. I'm going to show you real quick how you can enable or disable your audio if you're suddenly not getting any audio. So let's crank this up. Okay, so we can hear my audio is working just fine. If you open up your Drastic menu by just pressing the home button, you'll see this little dial down here. Now, let me get the stylus to point this out. If If you look here in the top left, you can see that this is your volume icon. This slash through it is indicating that if you hit the L button, you will disable your audio. So right now we'll go ahead and hit the L button, and now you can see it kicked me out of the drastic menu, and my audio is no longer working. If we jump back into the drastic menu and hit, this is L1, hit L1, boom, suddenly my audio is now working. So I'm assuming that this is what's going on with some people, is they're getting their devices with that mute button toggled on. So that should be your quick and simple fix. So as mentioned, I did ask a few people on Reddit what you guys wanted me to cover in this video. One person had asked if I could cover potentially multitasking with split screen on this device, and I'm sorry to say, but it does not seem like that is possible. I've tried digging through all the settings in this device. I've tried doing all of the gestures that you would do on like a Samsung device. I cannot get the dual screen to function. It's likely disabled with whatever weird version of Android they're running. From what I can see in the settings, it seems like it's just running Android 10. I'm honestly not even sure what the latest version of Android is this anymore. I don't keep up with it. But yeah, so you can see that we're on Android version 10, but they've definitely locked down quite a bit of things that you would normally be able to do. For example, this leads me to the next request that I got on Reddit, which was to do a bunch of Android gaming, because this is an Android device and most reviewers seem to have glossed over that. I think that's just because most people buy this device for DS gaming. But Android gaming on this device it's tricky. So the problem with it is it does not come with Google Play installed. It actually doesn't come with any app store at all. So you have to either find a APK of the Google Play Store, which is going to be very sketchy, or you have to do what I did and download a third-party app store. So what I have here in the top left is the Aurora Store. Now if we go ahead and open this up, you'll be able to see that it basically functions the same as the Google Play Store. So we've got apps, we can swipe through all of these apps. You can navigate with the D-pad as well. We've got games down here. Takes a second or two to load, but it's not too bad. And we can swipe through all of these games. But the problem is, a lot of these games, you go to tap on them. Let me see if I can find one that says it. Let's try and search for something real quick. So let's look for Slay the Spire, for example. So what you'll notice is a lot of these games, you see that? Let me get the stylus again. Right here, requires GSF. GSF is Google Services Framework or something like that. Basically, you cannot play these games that have that marker unless you somehow manage to install the Google Play services and the services framework and whatever else it requires. I did find a video of someone getting all of that set up on some other retro handhelds, not this one in particular, so maybe that's something I can look into. I tried to look around and get it installed myself. It seemed like a real pain. All of the APK files that I downloaded just simply did not work. So that's a big downside to Android gaming on this device. If you download this third-party app store because you don't have Google Play, and you look up your favorite game and it says requires GSF, chances are you're not going to be able to play it. That being said, there are a lot of games on here that do not require GSF and you can play just fine. So if we jump back to the home screen, yeah, double tap and it should send you back. So if we look at my downloads list, you'll see that I have Geometry Dash Lite, which I'll showcase in a second, does work decently. We've got Mario Kart, unfortunately, does not work. I'll show you why in a second. We've got Slay the Spire, works, but has issues. Again, I'll show you in a second. Soul Knight also works, and Shattered Pixel Dungeon also works. I'm not really a big Android gaming type of guy, so I didn't know what the top and most recommended games are that you guys want to see, so I just picked some that seemed like they would be cool. As mentioned, Geometry Dash does work, so we'll jump into that real quick and kind of show you what that looks like. Okay, so for Geometry Dash, we can see that everything works fine. It's touch based. You can play this in vertical or horizontal mode. So this is vertical, and we could do this. You could use the stylus as well, and it works as you would expect, right? Okay, so now that I quit out the game, I'm going to show you how you can play this in the horizontal form factor, which is going to be a lot better for most Android games. So if you just swipe down from the top, you have this menu, and you'll see that you have a screenshot icon, and then you also have this default, this thing that says default. That is how you're going to rotate your screen. So if we just tap this, you can see, boom, we've rotated it into a horizontal form factor. So now we can swipe this away, and let's jump back over to my apps, switch to all, Geometry Dash. Okay, so now we can load up Geometry Dash horizontally. Again, get the stylus out, boom, and now it's going to look and play a lot better than trying to play it vertically. I'm still terrible at the game, clearly. But yeah, so you can play your Android games horizontally, vertically. It really comes down to what your preference is. Okay, they've got way too many ads in this game. Let's switch this back to vertical. And I accidentally took a screenshot. I've done that probably 10 times. Okay, so after accidentally taking 2 or 3 screenshots, let's jump back over to my apps. What I wanted to showcase is some games you can launch in vertical mode, but they're going to be missing part of the screen. I think Soul Knight is one of those, so we'll load it up. Yep. So as you can see, bottom half of the screen is black, whereas the top, I don't know, what is that, quarter or so of the screen is actually going to be the game once it finally loads in. And that's another thing to keep in mind, is a lot of these Android games do take a while for them to load in. So be patient. Don't think that your device has suddenly frozen. Just give it a minute. Eventually the game will load in. Okay, and as we can see, the game has finally loaded in. We got some weird Google service error there at the bottom, but luckily this game still works without Google. Okay, so as we can see, this game in particular, if you try to force it into a vertical mode, it's just going to switch to horizontal and only use a small portion of your screen. And with this game in particular, it doesn't seem like it wants to allow you to use the built-in hardware buttons to control like some other Android games do. You just have to use the on-screen controls. Now, if we back out of this, let's switch back over to horizontal. Okay, let's try and load up Soul Knight again. Okay, so as we can see, this game runs pretty good. Never played it before, so seems like it's a cool little dungeon crawler beat 'em up. Kind of reminds me of Enter the Gungeon, if you guys ever played that game. Highly recommend it. Yeah, so this game looks like it's running perfectly fine, no issue, no stuttering. So this is Soul Knight. Never heard of it before, never played it before, but it does run pretty good. Okay, so now I think it's time to show you guys what happens when you try to run one of these games that require the Google Service Framework, such as Mario Kart. Okay, so here we have Mario Kart Tour. I thought that this would probably be the perfect Android game to test on this device, because you play this game in a vertical form factor. The problem, as you can see here, an error has occurred. You may not be signed into your Google account. Problem is, I am signed into my Google account, but this device is missing a few vital functions that allow you to connect to games from the Google Play Store, such as the Google Services Framework, which, from what I've been able to determine, I cannot get installed on this device. I've downloaded, I don't know, 4 or 5 different APKs from APK Mirror, which is a supposed trusted website, and they either fail the install or they just don't solve this issue. So any game that says it needs GSF, you just cannot play it, which is very unfortunate because I feel like Mario Kart Tour would be the perfect Android game to play on this device. Let's test out my issue with Slay the Spire. So Slay the Spire, I probably should have launched this in horizontal form factor, but I'll show you what's going on with this. Okay, so again, we get to this screen where it wants you to select the save slot. Boom. Select the save slot. If we hit cancel, can't do anything. If you try and fill out your name, can't do anything. I've tried everything you can possibly think of. Nothing gets around this name pop-up, which is really, really unfortunate because this game is amazing. This would be a great game to just be able to, this would be a great game to, swipe your cards with your stylus, play with your finger, whatever. It's a very, very addicting card-based roguelite, but unfortunately you can just not get past this screen. So that game is also unplayable. Very unfortunate. Alright, last Android-based game on here that I want to showcase for you guys is this one called Shattered Pixel Dungeon. I saw this recommended by a few people on Google as a good vertical Android game to play, so we'll hop in there and you can see everything loads in pretty quickly. Let's skip past all of this. Alright, so this is a pixel graphic dungeon crawling type of game. It's pretty interesting. I played through a little bit of it earlier. Combat's super basic. You just spam your A button, run through and try and find different loot, get to different floors. Oh, I'm about to get killed by this snake. I'm doing no damage. Oh my god. Yeah, I just got cooked by that snake. Anyways, this game runs great. Whenever I tested it earlier, I actually got pretty far and had a pretty fun time with it, honestly. I think if you're able to find this small niche of Android games that are vertical based and don't require GSF or whatever that Google framework is, then those are going to be the main games that you want to play on this device. Some games you can play horizontal, as we saw with that, what was that game called? Soul Knight. So as we saw with Soul Knight, you can rotate and use the on-screen controls and everything plays great. However, if you can find vertical Android games that also support the hardware inputs, that's going to be your best bet for Android gaming. Anything that requires Google Service Framework, it just doesn't work, unfortunately. Hopefully someone comes out with a custom OS, a custom ROM that you can load for this device, but currently I don't believe there are any available, so we're kind of just stuck with what we have. So Android gaming on this device it's very iffy at best. It's not amazing. I think somebody else wanted me to try Tate Games, or Tate I think is how it's pronounced. It's a Japanese word. So if we load up the library here, you can see the SD card actually came preloaded with a ton of these games. The problem is the naming convention is just based off of what they named the zip file. So like this one is called Armor Car. The game is supposed to be Armored Car. A lot of these games, I'm going to be honest, I'm just not familiar with at all. This is not a system I usually play on. So I don't know what are good games to show off for this system. We can just pick a random one though. Oh, D-Saber, Dragon Saber. I tried this one earlier. It's a very interesting game. So you control a dragon and you shoot fireballs, and it is interesting. Had a very long intro. Hopefully I can skip past it. So as we can see, you've got this MAME overlay here at the bottom, just because of the fact that otherwise your game would be stretched. But yeah, we can see we've got this very interesting game. I've never seen anything like it. I mean, there's a ton of games in this style, these endless arcade games where you're just shooting stuff. I don't know if these are called like shoot 'em ups or something. They probably are. But yeah, this is a very interesting one where you are a dragon. So that's kind of cool if you're into that. Fun little game to play. So we got this game, 1941 Counterattack. Yeah, I mean, pretty much all these games run perfectly. Like, I don't think I've encountered a single one that has any issues running. Okay, I'm not too good at these games, but yeah, pretty much all of the games that I've tried under this system, they run great. No complaints for any of these games. I do at some point need to get some other systems loaded up on here and test them out. The thing is, the way I look at this device is this is essentially a DS dedicated device. You can load up NES, you can load up Game Boy, etc. But the problem with those systems is you're going to be limited to just this top half of the screen. And this is already a very tiny screen, so you're limiting yourself to a 2.5-inch display, which is very strenuous on your eyes. For me, I essentially got this specifically as a DS-only device. Maybe some arcade games here if I'm really feeling them, but for the most part, I'm loading this up just to play DS games. And as I mentioned, it comes with pretty much the entire library already loaded up, which is pretty crazy to me. For legal purposes, I own every single one of these games. I'm pretty sure this is running at a 1.9x scaling. So this is not going to be a perfect integer scale just because of the screen size. But yeah, it looks pretty sharp. This is going to be sharper than what you get on your standard DS or 3DS. But again, the screen overall itself is pretty tiny. It just kind of depends on the game you're playing. I feel like for most DS games, it really doesn't bother me that much. But I can't see myself playing anything else on here. Like, I'm not going to load up Game Boy or NES or any game that, typically you want that 4:3 or 16:9 aspect ratio. Like, they're just not going to work on this system. That's not what this is designed for. This is basically an arcade, vertical arcade, and Nintendo DS system. And if you manage to find some vertical Android games, those will work great on here too. But anything else, this is not your system. This is not what you don't want to buy this system to play those games. It's just going to be a bad experience. Yeah, so overall, I think that's pretty much the end of my comparison video here. If you left something on Reddit for me to test and I did not test it, I am sorry. I probably just could not get it working. I spent probably the past 6 hours or so trying to get Android games working on here, and I could not get it running. They really want that Google Services framework for most of them. Well, so I think that about wraps things up on this video. Who is this device for? Honestly, I think if you're looking for something that'll be a dedicated DS device, do a little bit of vertical Android gaming, do a little bit of vertical arcade gaming, then this is a great device for you. However, if you want something that can do all the way up to 3DS and is a little bit larger in terms of screen size, I would probably go with a used 3DS, 2DS, something along those lines. This device has potential to be good in future revisions. I think, like I said, if they come out with an XL version and they also put a stronger chip that can do 3DS emulation, this device will sell like hotcakes. And I wouldn't be surprised if they're already working on making a device with those specifications, just because this device had a lot of hype when it came out. but a lot of people were saying the same thing. The screen is a little bit too small, and the fact that it can't play 3DS games is a little bit of a bummer when you consider its direct competition, at least in my eyes, is the 2DS. Same form factor, dual screen, no fold. This plays 3DS, this only plays DS. This has a big screen, this has a small screen. Honestly, for me at this point, after messing around with this device, it's a cool little device, don't get me wrong, and for lightweight DS gaming, it's not bad. But I think I would much rather personally either get a 2DS, a 3DS, or if I'm only looking to play up to DS games, I would still consider a DS Lite or a DSi compared to this. The thing with this one is you don't have the folding, flip design that you're going to get on a DS device. So the pocketability of this is just not there. It is a cool device, and I know in this hobby, in this niche, people like to hop on the new devices, but I'm being honest with you, I probably wouldn't recommend this. Go get a DS, go get a 3DS, get something else, mod it, do the same thing that this can do, but better.